Hello, welcome, and we're very glad to have Russell here with us this evening. A little bit of a disclaimer, Russell and I are friends. We work together since around summer 2017, on and off, and then he worked at ustwo for a little bit. I wasn't going to be the person asking him some questions, but here I am. So hopefully you'll also all contribute and bring your own questions as well. So Russell, first of all, could you give us a little bit of a potted bio for those of you who don't know who you are?
Yes. Hello. One of the things I like about Nicki is she felt like she had to ask permission to describe us as friends at the beginning, which is nice. I started my professional life as in advertising, as an account person. Because I didn't drink, I was told I had to become a planner because I was no good at entertaining clients. Did that for a while, fairly unremarkably. Got interested in computers in a small way, which led to a job in Portland, Oregon, an agency called Wieden & Kennedy, who just won the Microsoft business. This was in 95. And I was one of like two planners in the world who knew how to turn on a computer. So I got a job there. But what was good is they also had the Nike business. And they were like the best agency in the world. So moved to Portland, Oregon for 5 years, came back, worked in the UK for Wieden for another sort of 5 years. And like it was just a place where I did well. It suited me. They never did any research. And what happened after that? And then freelance for a while, crash happened. Got a job in a big agency. It was awful. Various other things happened. Ended up working for the government at the government digital service. So sort of managed to get all the way through the advertising and internet revolution without ever doing any internet advertising, and went straight on to doing digital services. Did that for a while. Went back into agencies. Ended up at ustwo for a little while. Easily the best bit of the whole thing. Ended up at a renewable energy company called Bulb for a long time. Then got 2P'd into another renewable energy company. And of late, I'm now an estate agent, working for the Modern House. I'm now marketing director of the Modern House.
There we go. Very nice potted bio.
That was
Thank
a nice,
you.
I like noise. That was a nice noise.
So you've been interested in the idea of interesting for a while, right? And I think it was around 2007 started the interesting conferences, and then at some point was there a boring conference in response to the interesting conferences? Can you tell us a little bit, how did you get interested in the idea of interesting, which obviously has become an inspiration for the book?
Yes. So the going to Portland and working for Wieden & Kennedy, like I say, there were basically two big accounts in the agency. There was Microsoft and Nike. Nike at the time were doing the best advertising in the world, and I was working on Microsoft, and we were not doing the best advertising in the world. And me and another planner there, a chap called Jeffrey Jackson, were trying to reverse engineer how Nike did good work in order to be able to explain it to Microsoft, to make them do it, basically. And Jeffrey had worked in San Francisco, where there was an awareness of a sort of 60s ad guy called Howard Gossage, who was famous in that world. He's a bit more known now in advertising, but he wasn't that well known then, who'd done extraordinarily odd and interesting advertising in the 60s. One of the things he said is people don't read advertising, people read what's interesting. Sometimes it's an ad. And I mean, that doesn't sound that revolutionary as an idea, but inside advertising, it is revolutionary. And we sort of realized that what Nike did, basically, what they had intuited, because they never really thought about it, was that the way to be good at advertising was just to make stuff that was more worth watching than anything else you could conceivably watch. And that solved loads of problems. Like if you just made it like stuff that people wanted to watch. And we just became interested in the idea of what makes things interesting. Thought about that quite a lot. Jeffrey is and still is much more rigorous and disciplined than I am. So he's writing a really long book about interestingness for sort of corporations. I ended up writing a blog post about it because I was asked to do a teacher class at the University of Oregon just for like a half day. And normally that was the thing that art directors or copywriters did. And they have actual useful transferable skills. So they teach people how to write or art direct, or I didn't know any of that. So I sort of thought about, well, what can I teach people? And I realized that a very useful skill for sort of creative generalists is just being interesting, like it being in a meeting and sort of having something interesting to say. So I thought I'd try and teach that and do it in a very sort of didactic way, not like a have a big personality kind of way, but like follow these instructions and it will follow. So I did that. It went quite well, wrote it up as a blog post. It was the early days of blogging, so it became, a reasonably popular blog post. And if you Googled how to be interesting, you found my blog post for quite a long time. Then I started the interesting conferences at the Conway Hall because I'd been to TED one year. Nike paid for me to go to TED. It was fantastic. It was, I think, the first or second year. It was before they were televising it or, putting it on the internet. I just really liked the idea of short talks about interesting stuff was a new and interesting idea, but it was really expensive. And in between, so Nike had paid for me. Then I left Nike, was freelancing, but we'd saved enough money for me to go again. And I realized actually I could spend the money it would have cost to go to TED putting on my own conference. So we did that instead, and we put on Interesting at the Conway Hall, which was short talks about interesting things. Did that for about 4 years, maybe more. It became like a thing, so I stopped. And then someone said, oh, well, it was good. Let's start Boring instead as an alternative, which is just a much better name. And journalists really they were all able to write. The interesting conferences cancelled due to lack of interest, but now there's a boring thing. So they did that for a few years. And then a while ago, I realized I missed it and started again. So we did it again. That's rambly, isn't it? Sorry, Nikki.
Yeah, I like it. So do you think we, as humans and as collective society, have actually lost our ability to be interesting? Is that why you've had to write a book for us?
Wow. Yeah, definitely. No, I wrote the book because the Do people said, will you write a book? And I didn't have anything. I had like a bunch of stuff about interestingness. So sort of turned it into that.
That was a mean question to me.
Yeah. But I mean, do I think that the existence of the book is like cheap opportunism? But what we, I think, tried to do is point out that interestingness is not charisma. It is not, like a personality type. It's not a thing you're born with. It's a habit you can acquire.
Mary Oliver at the beginning, it's very clear, pay attention, be a scholar, tell.
Yes.
And Mary Oliver, if you don't know, is an amazing poet.
Yes, I mean, that's literally the amount I've read.
There you go, that's different.
That is quite literally the difference. It's like I've skimmed the surface of a lot of things.
So on that art, I think one of the things that you talk about quite a lot is the habit, right? So you're inspiring people to develop that habit, and you're kind of saying it's not about making yourself interesting, it's about making your world interesting. So can you talk to us about how people think about those habits? Because it's not an easy thing to do, particularly if you're short on time, or sure many people just feel that they are. So is it a trade-off? How do you develop that discipline?
there's a few things in there. I think part of what we tried to do is point. I think some of what it does is point out to people that this is stuff they already do, and that it's good. It's not that scribbling down notes or collecting things or collecting screenshots or like these are good and valid and useful creative habits. And if you keep doing them over the course of several years, they turn into useful things. Because I think one of the things I was trying to defeat was the sort of the perfectionism of a lot of creative and productivity stuff. Like you have to do this and you have to do it every day and you have to be, dedicated and focused. And I think the habits we're trying to encourage are like things you can do if you remember, and like things that fit in around your life and things that are easy, and you just have to do 2 minutes a day, and you do that for a while, it'll turn into something. It doesn't have to be Spartan and determined and relentless. It's to some extent just validating stuff you already do, or maybe dialing it up a tiny amount, and filling up idle minutes, which however busy you are, you're sometimes in a waiting room, and it's like when you're in a waiting room, here's a thing to do, rather than it's that level of when I was trying to sell it to the publisher, I think I said something like, it's really, really minor productivity, which she didn't feel was a compelling sort of offer. But it's like not change your life. It's like slightly uch it up a bit.
Nice. Okay. So are there some tools that people can use to make that easier? Whether that's, you give quite a lot of hints and tips, but what would be the kind of things people can think about? Yes, screenshots and writing week notes. You do have some of your collaborators or contributors in the audience. I don't know if anyone wants to answer on Russell's behalf about week notes.
Look at them. No,
Stare them down.
They don't want to. I think the number one. Part of this may have been part of the pitch. It's so banal. It seems ridiculous to repeat it on stage.
Go for it.
But it is things like take notes. It is things like write things down, take photos. If you see something vaguely interesting, take a picture of it. But people don't, because they think, oh, that's not a creative practice. That's not a huge creative endeavor. But if you do a little, most people never do. So if you do, you've got a slight edge. You're just slightly ahead of the game if you do those things. So yeah, it's pay attention. So it's actively notice stuff when you can, and indulge your little interests. So there's Ursula K. Le Guin quote, or one of the characters in one of her books says something about making a virtue of your peculiarities. And it's a bit of that. It's a bit of like, what are the things I'm interested in? Notice that, collect those things in some way, whether it's pictures or screenshots or physical stuff or whatever it is, and then allow it to seep into your work. And if it gets into your work becomes more interesting, because most of us are in worlds, probably in this room, where like nothing we can do will make anything that bad. Like, our work lives are just not that consequential. So, like, it will be like, so everyone's choosing between like reasonably good things, that it may as well be like a slightly more interesting one, or it may as well be the one with a bit of you in it, and that's more likely to be more human and interesting and connected than the other idea, which is just a product of a creative brief and a process, you know. So it's kind of, it's like low stakes creativity. That's what's appealing about it to some extent, I think.
Makes sense. I'm going to come back to the tools because I like practical tips.
Yeah.
So you said that your notebook is a lens for looking at the world, not a box to keep it in. So yeah, do you remember that?
It's good.
It's a nice line, Russell. Well done. I could keep this up all day, but I won't keep quoting you at yourself.
But I also thought that the other thing that one of your contributors, Anne, mentioned was constraints and how short, writing shorter stories can help things be
more interesting. And you don't have to answer the question. How practically, what would you recommend if people were going to leave this evening and say, great, I now feel inspired to be a little bit more interesting. We'll keep the bar low, just as Russell is instructing us to. What 3 things could we do this week to make space for, to just be that little bit more interesting?
I would, when I imagine this happens to quite a lot of you, not all of you, but is when Dropbox prompts you to make one of your put your screenshots in a folder, say yes. And keep all your screenshots in one folder for the rest of your life. Because and then screenshot stuff. Because when you go back looking for that screenshot of the energy bill, because you want to complain to someone, you will come across an interesting thing, that you screenshotted. Or when you're having to do a presentation and you're like, I know there's a thing that I want to include in this, it's in your screenshot folder. So and you'll go through it and you'll find it. So that's thing 1. Thing 2 is keep stuff in a PowerPoint deck. Just open a PowerPoint deck and put stuff in it. Put interesting things that you find. Pictures, quotes, graphs, charts that work well, bits of film, bits of music, whatever it is, and keep that for the rest of your life. So it's a scrapbook, it's a commonplace book, but it's in PowerPoint. So if you have to do a presentation about something, you never have to start from scratch. You're always I've got a thing that I can use. There's an analogy or a story or a metaphor or something that I can use in that presentation. And thing 3 is write a poem every week or every day.
Do you do that?
No,
okay. Just checking. It's okay. The first 2 sound really useful. The third one, Russell's taking you all for a ride. But you do write a newsletter regularly, semi-regularly, and you let us know how many subscribers you've got, and you try and make it interesting.
I write a monthly newsletter.
Monthly. I wasn't sure on the cadence.
I guess the other thing is find a way. So the subtitle of the book is Notice, Collect, Share. So, and sharing is the other bit that I think in a world of very low levels is the next level, which is once you've paid attention to these things, once you've collected these things, finding a way to share them is the next thing that makes things work, which might be, there's someone I interviewed for the book who describes it as, I saw this and thought of you. So that if you find a thing, think about who might like it and share it with them. That makes it more interesting for both of you, and the conversation you have about it will be interesting. If you blog or you do a newsletter or you put it in presentations or you make a video or you just show it to people, that squares or cubes the value of the thing that you've got. And that's one of the reasons, the book is, when do people talk to me about doing it, my second or third thought was to get other people involved. So there's more voices than mine in it. I think that's one of the things that makes it more interesting. And I really wanted it to have more names than mine on the cover, but that wasn't allowed. But that's I think that is a huge difference. Again, I think one of the things that doesn't get talked enough about in the world that we mostly inhabit is that almost nothing is the product of a single person anymore. Not much art, no writing, certainly not any kind of commercial creativity is like done by a single person. But we don't have structures or habits for talking about that often. I mean, some industries are better at it than others, but publishing is terrible at that. But those kinds of skills, the skills of working with other people around ideas, is part of what makes this work.
You've talked a lot about things we can practically do, which is brilliant. And a lot of the book is about personal interests. How within the workplace, you talked obviously about PowerPoint. For anyone who isn't a Microsoft user, obviously replace anything Russell says about PowerPoint with slides. Being interesting is actually being interested. So in the workplace, how do you see that playing out? Like, how do we show up as more interested individuals beyond the collecting and noticing and sharing? Are there other things
we've noticed after so many years of pursuing interesting as a practice?
These are great questions.
Thanks, Russell.
I haven't. I'll tell you one thing is I think the way to do it at work is to always try and work on the most boring things, because they're actually the interesting ones. Like it is, insurance and property and, So again, I interviewed someone else in the book, Tom Whitwell, who some of you might have come across, who writes that 52 Things I Learned This Year newsletter every year, and has had a really interesting career and varied career. And he talks about the same things. The people he's drawn to are the people who want to work on the dull stuff, because they are there to make it interesting. And that's what the best creative businesses and people do, is they take something apparently dull and make it interesting. Whereas working on like Apple or Nike or like any of those things is a nightmare, because it's already good. And you can't help. And they got good by making dull things interesting. Like Nike made running interesting. Apple made computing interesting. They weren't beforehand. And like, if you can take a dull thing and find the magic in it, because everything's got people in it. It's all got interesting stuff in it. It's all got tension and arguments and love and drama in it. It's just that it's sometimes cloaked in language and bureaucracy and stuff. But if you can find that, and you're the first person to emerge from a tedious category with an interesting idea, it's gorgeous. That's the fun of it. The other stuff, I once worked with a media director, Ron, who everyone adored, and I couldn't work out why. And I realised his default sitting position in a meeting was with his head to one side like that, and he just looked interested the whole time. And it was just like everyone liked Ron because he just looked interested.
Was he interested? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was in media. It didn't matter. And then I had another boss who trained himself to whatever anyone said to him, he would go, "That's interesting," because it just gave him a minute to think. It's like, oh God, what, But he would say that straight away. It was, interesting, because interesting as a word has cropped up in my life. I notice all these occasions, and it's really hard to stop saying.
You're an interesting collector as well as a writer.
It's very hard to stop describing things as interesting. It's also a convenient word for a bag of stuff about a thing, that you want to say positive stuff about it, but you don't know how to be more specific than that. Is
there another word people can use? Because there's a lot of, oh, that's interesting, sounds good, that's interesting.
I don't know. Well, the young people would say engaging, but I think that means something else.
this is more of a kind of us two type question. So writing a book
Yeah.
is, like many things that we set out to do, a bit of a process of discovery. What's the biggest thing you learned while you were writing Do Interesting, about yourself or about the people you collaborated with, or anything in general?
Never collaborate. About myself, I learned, and this is interesting only to me, I learned that I have no writer's block at all, but I have tremendous reader's block. So this lot wrote quite a lot of it, but the bit I wrote about 40,000 words in about 2 months, relatively easily, and then probably took another 2 months to read any of it. So I just didn't look at it, and that was weird. I had literally written it, but I was terrified of reading it. And that, I think, actually quite a lot of writer's block is probably that. It's being afraid of looking at what you've written to see that it's terrible, because I can write 1,000 words like that, but looking back at it is terrifying. What else did I learn? I genuinely learned that getting other people involved is just such a good thing to do. Even the people who ended up with no words in the book.
Oh, I guess then, are they here this evening? That's a bit awkward.
Look, I mean, all books.
All books involve editing.
Yeah, but also this is just what I think, basically, and it's a bit now. It's like what I think plus what they think. I certainly find that I think best in conversation, and so the conversations around what should go in the book and what we talked about made the thinking better. And to some extent, writing, I think, is a pretend conversation as well. And I just think that makes stuff so much better for me anyway. I'm sure there's other ways of writing. So that getting people involved is well worth it, despite all the obvious penalties. That was a big thing. It's also, I mean, this is a terrible thing to say, it's easier than it seems. It really is.
That's an inspiring thing to say, not a terrible thing to say.
Yeah.
You're inspiring everyone to go out and write their own books with 33 recommendations.
This metaphor has been coming up a lot recently, but it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You can write a terrible first draft really easily. Like, that's easy. And then you just edit it until it's good. And that's easy too. I mean, not if you want to do art, like, not if you want to write like the great American novel, but if you want to write a thing that someone will publish, that'll do, because it's like getting a bad first draft is reasonably straightforward, and then you can just polish it. And it's like doable. I've done it 3 times now. None of them are brilliant, but they're all published, and it's doable, and it's like it's not a way to make money, but it's kind of a really interesting project, and you end up with this bag of stuff that people talk to you about, which is nice. It's a nice thing. And occasionally I got an email a few weeks ago from someone who bought the book for his mum, and she really liked it. And I'm like, that'll do. Well,
Thank you, Russell. So there you go. It's easy to write something, and you can all go and do that. But perhaps
I wouldn't say it's easy. It's easier than it seems.
It's easier than it seems. Russell, thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.